Bengaluru, India, you know, a city that just seems to hum with life, opportunity, a place where it feels like, I don't know, like dreams actually have the space to, take root.
It's that energy that draws so many people in.
Right. But it's also, and this is what we're diving into today, the backdrop for a story. A story about ambition, about the bonds of friendship, and ultimately a tragedy. The kind of story that reminds us that even in those bright, vibrant corners of the world, darkness, well, it can be lurking just beneath the surface.
And tragically, this isn't just an isolated incident. It speaks to something unfortunately far more universal. These cases, they really force us to look at those deeper societal issues, the pressures, the vulnerabilities that can converge, and sometimes in the most tragic ways imaginable.
We're talking about the murder of Kriti Kumari, a young woman who, like so many others, came to Bengaluru to build a life for herself. And for this deep dive, we've got two main perspectives to weave together. We've got a news report from the Deccan Herald, straightforward, lays out the facts, but then we also have this really insightful YouTube essay, more like a case study, from the channel SRP Way.
What I find fascinating is how both, despite being such different mediums, really underscore this need to understand not just the what of what happened, but the why.
Exactly. So let's start, I guess, at the beginning with Kriti. Imagine for a moment you're a young woman, early 20s, ambitious, driven, leaving your family for the first time, determined to, carve your own path.
It's a universal experience in many ways, that yearning for independence.
Totally. And that was Kriti, born in 2000, raised in Bihar. She completes her education, even goes on to get her MBA. Talk about driven.
It's a familiar narrative, isn't it?
Yeah.
Especially in these rapidly expanding urban centers, young professionals seeking opportunity, independence, chasing those dreams.
Absolutely. And for Kriti, Bengaluru was that beacon. January 2024, she lands a job. Business development associate. Not a bad start at all. And she just dives headfirst into this new life, finds a place in a PG accommodation, which, from what I hear, that's incredibly common for young people in these big cities.
Oh, absolutely. More than just housing, though, wouldn't you say?
Mm.
They become like these microcosms of society. All these young people from all walks of life thrown together, navigating this new city, all seeking connection, community. They become like these melting pots of aspirations and anxieties.
And even amidst, this exciting new chapter, I imagine there's that inevitable pang of loneliness. And our sources mention how much Kriti missed her family, that close-knit world she left behind.
A classic push and pull, right? The allure of independence versus those familiar comforts, those ties that bind. It's something so many of us grapple with when we step outside our comfort zones.
So true. But here's where Kriti's story, it takes a turn. She finds solace, a sense of belonging, through a colleague. They become close friends. And wouldn't you know it, this friend is also new to Bengaluru.
It highlights just how vital those strong social connections are, especially in unfamiliar environments. These friendships, they become lifelines, offering not just, practical support, but emotional support as well.
And as we'll see, this friendship, this bond, it plays a pivotal and ultimately tragic role in Kriti's story. So we've got Kriti, starting to find her footing in this new city, a promising career, this incredibly close bond with her friend. But within this friendship, another layer emerges, a darker layer. And it's a story, unfortunately, of domestic abuse. Kriti's friend, you see, she was in a relationship with this guy, Abhishek Ghosi.
And this is where the narrative takes on this whole other weight, wouldn't you say?
Oh.
It forces us to confront this really difficult reality. That abuse, it can fester even in the places we often consider, safe, even under the guise of love.
Abhishek, he was 25, also working in Bangalore, at least initially. But the sources, they paint a picture of someone who's really struggling to keep his head above water. He loses his job, and it's like, that's when things with Kriti's friend, they start to, unravel. And fast.
It's a tragic pattern we see often, unfortunately. Studies actually show a strong correlation between unemployment and a rise in domestic violence.
Right.
That financial strain, it's like a pressure cooker, amplifying existing tensions, power imbalances within a relationship.
It's like that pressure, it creates the perfect breeding ground for these really, really awful behaviors to surface. And sadly, it's what happened here with Abhishek. He becomes controlling, verbally abusive, and there are even instances of physical violence toward Kriti's friend detailed in the sources. And what makes it even more complicated is that, with him out of work, she's the one who becomes his financial support.
See, that financial dependence, that becomes a weapon in itself.
Yeah.
trapping victims in this awful cycle of abuse, making it that much harder to even consider leaving.
It's heartbreaking, and it brings us to this, well, this heart-wrenching decision. Kriti's friend, facing this escalating abuse, she finds herself, I imagine, with very few options. And Kriti, in this incredible act of friendship, opens her home, offers her friend refuge, a chance really to escape a dangerous situation.
It speaks volumes, doesn't it? That willingness to open your door, your life, to someone you love and need. It really speaks to Kriti's character, her empathy. But it also highlights those impossible choices victims are often left grappling with. Endure in silence, or risk seeking help, potentially facing even greater danger.
And tragically, for Kriti, this act of selflessness, this instinct to help, well, it has devastating consequences. Neither of them, I imagine, could have known that Abhishek's rage, his possessiveness, was about to reach this boiling point. And Kriti, in a moment of compassion, would unwittingly become his target.
This is where the situation it escalates from this horrific domestic dispute to something far, far more sinister.
Yeah.
A premeditated act of violence fueled by, misplaced blame and a desire for revenge. It's chilling.
It's late, July 23rd. Nearing midnight, actually. Kriti's back at her PG, I imagine. Just trying to unwind after a long day.
Just another night. The rhythms of daily life, especially in a city that never sleeps. But as we know, this normalcy is about to be shattered.
And shattered it is. There's this frantic knocking at the door. Kriti opens it, maybe thinking, I don't know, some kind of emergency. And there he is, Abhishek. He'd somehow, and this is chilling, bypassed the PG's security entirely.
And what's particularly unsettling, and the SRP analysis really digs into this, is it seems like this wasn't just a simple oversight. They talk about these prevalent security lapses in these types of accommodations, malfunctioning biometric scanners, visitor logs not being properly maintained, even in some cases staff just, not really enforcing the protocols they have in place.
It's just infuriating to think that something as basic as, a secure entrance could have potentially prevented this whole thing. But in that moment, all Kriti sees is this man consumed by rage.
And let's not forget, as that Deccan Herald report highlighted, he came armed. He had a knife concealed in a plastic bag. That speaks to a chilling level of premeditation.
A plan.
Right, something that likely festered during that escape.
That SRP piece, they do a chilling job, really, dissecting this. They point to similar cases where abusers, driven by this, this sense of ownership, this need for revenge, they specifically target those they perceive as obstacles or threats. And in this case, Kriti, by offering her friend shelter, she became that target.
It's this really awful reminder of the complex psychology at play with abusers. Their actions, they're never truly about the victim. It's this warped projection of their own, insecurities, their need for control. And sadly, Kriti, in that moment of just pure compassion, she unknowingly walked right into the path of that rage.
It's hard to even, imagine what happens next. Abhishek, he lunges at Kriti. There's a struggle. She tries to fight back, but he's relentless. He stabs her repeatedly. The sources detail these horrific injuries, her neck, her chest, her arms.
The level of brutality is it's deeply upsetting. It speaks to this rage that goes beyond any sort of rational conflict. And what's even more tragic is that Kriti's story is not unique. Thousands of women, particularly in India, face similar threats within their own homes, often from the very people they should be able to trust the most.
It's a stark reminder of just how pervasive this issue of domestic violence truly is. The other residents in the PG, they hear the commotion, they rush to help, but it's too late. Abhishek, realizing he's trapped, delivers this final fatal blow to Kriti's throat and flees.
Leaving behind this scene of just unimaginable horror, a young woman full of life, so much promise, her future just stolen. And for what? To satisfy the ego of a man driven by possessiveness and rage, it's senseless.
It's a question that, while it haunts you, it feels impossible to really comprehend the depths of that kind of violence. Thankfully, though, Abhishek wasn't able to escape justice completely. He fled, went back to his home state of Madhya Pradesh, but thankfully, through CCTV footage, the police were able to track him down. He was arrested, and he's currently in custody awaiting trial.
Which offers at least some glimmer of hope in terms of, at least legal accountability. But as we've discussed, this case, it goes far beyond just one man's actions. It forces us to confront the systemic failures that allowed this tragedy to unfold in the first place.
That's right. The lax security at the PG, the societal pressures that can exacerbate these situations of domestic violence, the lack of adequate support systems for victims. These are all issues that that demand our attention.
And that's what I find so powerful about these deep dives.
Yeah.
We're not just, I don't know, passively consuming information. We're engaging in this process of critical thinking. We're forced to ask ourselves those sometimes uncomfortable questions. What can we learn from this? What are our own biases? And most importantly, I think, what actions can we take individually and collectively to prevent these kinds of tragedies from happening again?
It's a heavy responsibility, but a necessary one. Kriti's story, it's this tragic reminder that behind the headlines, behind the statistics, are real people. With dreams, with loved ones, with futures that are tragically cut short. And while we can't bring Kriti back, we can honor her memory by choosing to be more aware, more vigilant, and more willing to speak out against injustice and support those who need it most.
Absolutely. Let Kriti's story be that call to action, that reminder that even those small acts of awareness, of advocacy, they can have a ripple effect, creating safer communities and hopefully preventing future tragedies.
This deep dive, it's been incredibly impactful and, if I'm being honest, a bit heavy. If you're listening to this, we encourage you to, well, to sit with Kriti's story. Think about the PGs in your city, the safety measures or lack thereof in your own building, even just the dynamics within your own relationships. What can you do, even in a small way, to create a world where compassion and safety go hand in hand? We'll leave you with that thought.